All right, let's get right into it. We're going to unpack a huge story today, one about intense political pressure, a full-blown institutional crisis, and the pretty spectacular downfall of a cabinet secretary who got caught right in the middle of it all. So at the center of this whole thing, you've got two main players. First, a president who's really flexing his muscles on the world stage, acting with this, incredible assertiveness. And second, his Homeland Security Secretary, who's back home facing just a storm of accusations. What we're about to see is a really stunning look at the chaos and the pressure, both inside and out, of an administration in turmoil.
Okay, so where does this all kick off? Well, it starts with the president taking a much more, let's say, hands-on approach to foreign policy. I mean, when he was asked about who Iran should pick for its next leader, his answer was just unbelievably direct. He called one of the potential guys a lightweight and basically said, "No, I have to be involved in this." He even compared it to how he handled politics in Venezuela. I mean, that's a pretty unusual thing for a U.S. president to say out loud.
And listen, it wasn't just Iran. He took that same approach with Israel. He gets on a call with Israeli media and calls their president, Isaac Herzog, a disgrace. A disgrace. And then he publicly demands that Herzog pardon Prime Minister Netanyahu, like, right now. He even adds this threat, saying, "Tell him I'm exposing him." Talk about a direct attempt to interfere in the legal system of one of America's closest allies.
Then you have the whole situation with Iran and the talk of military action. The official story, well, it seemed to keep changing. First, the president says it's about stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons. Simple enough, right? But then his press secretary comes out and gives this much vaguer reason, a feeling based on fact that Iran was about to attack the U.S. A feeling based on fact? That kind of inconsistency, you can imagine, raised a lot of questions about what was really going on.
So while the president is projecting this image of absolute power on the world stage, a completely different story is playing out back in the U.S. That same aggressive style that he was using in foreign policy, it started hitting some serious walls. We're talking major pushback from other parts of the government.
And that pushback? It came with a massive price tag. Just look at this number, $130 billion. That's how much the government had to repay after the Supreme Court flat out said the president's tariffs were unconstitutional. I mean, that's not just a financial blow. It's a huge legal defeat. It was the Supreme Court basically saying, hey, your power has limits.
But that Supreme Court ruling was just one piece of the puzzle. The administration was fighting battles on all fronts. You had over 20 state attorneys general suing them over new tariffs. The Department of Justice quietly dropped this politically sensitive investigation into the previous president. And even a personal project of the president's hit a major snag.
Yeah, that project was a new ballroom for the White House. The president was bragging that it was going to be the most beautiful ballroom in the entire world. But the public? They were not having it. The Planning Commission got something like 35,000 public comments, and a mind-blowing 97% of them were against it. 97%. The opposition was so overwhelming they had to pump the brakes and delay the vote.
So all this pushback, all this resistance, it all started to zero in on one person. And this is where the administration's biggest problem really came to a head. During a congressional testimony from their highest-ranking official under fire, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi. Okay, so a huge issue that came up during her testimony was this really controversial definition of domestic terrorism the administration was using. An internal memo showed they weren't just using it for, violent extremists. They were applying it to people who simply disagreed with their policies. They were basically reframing political opposition as a terroristic conspiracy. Think about that.
And the heat she was taking wasn't just from one side. It was totally bipartisan. You had Democrats accusing her of ignoring court orders, of illegally detaining U.S. citizens. But then you had Republicans who were just as angry. They hammered her for totally mismanaging FEMA, the disaster relief agency. And this was a big one. They said she was systematically blocking her own department's inspector general. Now, the inspector general is supposed to be an independent watchdog, so getting in their way is a very serious accusation. It basically suggests you're trying to hide something.
And this wasn't just on vague criticism from Republicans. It was sharp, it was personal. The Inspector General had actually complained publicly that her department was obstructing his work. So Republican Senator Thom Tillis gets up, looks right at her, and says that her stonewalling, her failure of leadership, that is exactly why he'd already called for her resignation.
Oof, that's tough to hear from your own party. But wait, there's more. As if mismanagement and stonewalling weren't enough, another layer to this whole story was about to drop, and this one was even more explosive. We're talking about specific, brazen allegations of corruption.
And at the heart of that was one number, $220 million. That was the price tag for a taxpayer-funded ad campaign. And who did that ad campaign just so happen to feature? Secretary Noem herself.
The real problem here was how this massive contract was handed out. So follow the money here. First, DHS approves this huge ad campaign. But the contract doesn't go to some big established ad agency. No, it goes to a brand new shell company that was literally created by a political operative just days before it got the contract. Then, that company turns around and subcontracts the actual work to a firm run by the husband of Noem's former spokesperson. See the connections?
I mean, the whole thing just looked so suspicious, and lawmakers were not buying it. Representative Joe Neguse really summed up the feeling in the room. He basically asked her, "You really want us to believe this is all a coincidence? That a company with no track record, not even a real office, just happens to land a $220 million contract?" The skepticism was just dripping from his voice.
So, with her back against the wall, Noem plays her biggest card. She says, look, I had nothing to do with awarding the contract. And then she drops this bombshell. She claims the entire ad campaign was personally signed off on by President Trump himself. She was pointing the finger directly at the White House.
A pretty powerful defense, right? Except for one thing. Just a few days later, the president completely pulls the rug out from under her. Reporters ask him about it, and he just flatly says, "I never knew anything about it." That's it. 7 words. And just like that, the secretary was completely on her own.
The end came fast. The president gets on social media and just announces he's replacing her. A public firing, just moments before she was supposed to give a big speech. And here's the kicker. It was a power move he didn't technically have. You can't just appoint a new cabinet secretary. They have to be confirmed by the Senate.
So, after she was fired, the political fallout was, as you can imagine, immediate and brutal. It ended up cementing a legacy that, well, let's just say it's not one that many people in public office would want.
And you can't make this stuff up. In what has to be a moment of just incredible irony, Noem gives her final speech, not even knowing yet that she's just been fired, and she misquotes George Orwell. You know, George Orwell, the author who wrote all about how authoritarian governments use and abuse language to control people. It was just a bizarrely fitting end to the whole thing.
Her political opponents, of course, did not hold back. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker put out this video message aimed right at her, basically saying, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Your legacy is corruption and chaos." And he promised she would still be held accountable for it.
And then the language got even more intense. Senator Ron Wyden posted this message that ended with a truly chilling line. "See you at Nuremberg 2.0. He's invoking the war crimes trials after World War II. I mean, that's about as serious an implication of future legal trouble as you can get.
So when you look at this whole story, from the aggressive foreign policy moves to the corruption and chaos at home, it really leaves us with a huge question. When the systems that are supposed to keep power in check, the courts, Congress, public opinion, when they are all pushed to their absolute breaking point, what's left to hold a government accountable? It's really something to think about.